Andrew, should I just sell my restaurant or should I try and fix it? I get asked this question all the time, and especially in the economy where we're at today, where there's kind of like a negative economic pressure on most restaurants and sales are trending down and things are getting harder pretty much after COVID. So the first question I always ask when someone comes to me with that is I say, hey, is the reason you're trying to sell your business because it is so successful that you're making tons of great money? It is kind of running on autopilot on its own, and you can get a great multiple for your business, and it's a really sellable and desirable asset? Or is it because it isn't making money, you're kind of a slave to your business, and you're just fed up and you just want to get out? Welcome back, everybody. It's Andrew Scott here from the Restaurant Growth Accelerator podcast. I am your host, a multi-unit restaurant owner for almost 20 years. And now with Owner Shift, we help restaurant owners increase their sales, increase their bottom line, and help them have more free time with their families. So today, I'm doing a solo episode because I'm just that cool and no one else wanted to join me. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about selling or buying a business. So the real question, and kind of where this came from, is I get asked this question all the time. Andrew, should I just sell my restaurant or should I try and fix it? And so we've helped a number of restaurant owners go through that. I have bought and sold businesses, and I thought it would be good to kind of take a sneak peek behind the curtain of what that's actually like, because it'll answer a lot of questions for people. And especially in the economy where we're at today, where there's kind of like a negative economic pressure on most restaurants and sales are trending down and things are getting harder pretty much after COVID. There's been just nonstop challenges for restaurants. So a lot of people come to me and they're like, man, I've just had it. I'm ready to throw in the towel. Like, how do I sell this thing, or what do I do? So let's dive into that question. So the first question I always ask when someone comes to me with that is I say, hey, is the reason you're trying to sell your business because it is so successful that you're making tons of great money? It is kind of running on autopilot on its own, and you can get a great multiple for your business, and it's a really sellable and desirable asset? Or is it because it isn't making money, you're kind of a slave to your business, and you're just fed up and you just want to get out? So most of the time, it is the latter of the two. It's because they don't know how to fix it, their option is, oh, I should just sell it. And sometimes I hear this coming from husbands or wives. If their partner owns the business, they're like, I'm just sick and tired of you 6 years in, just sell the business and be done with it. And they're just tired of it. And so I hear these conversations all the time. So I wanted to go into a little bit of detail on what that looks like, what you can expect, and basically so you can make the most educated decision possible about where you go from here. Should you fix it? Should you sell it? Let's find out. So the first thing we have to do is figure out how much is your business worth. Because if you're going to sell it, someone once told me, like, anything is for sale, it just depends on the price, right? So we need to kind of figure out, okay, what can I reasonably expect to get from the sale of my restaurant? So there's a formula that's commonly used. And so if you go and approach people who value businesses or business brokers and stuff like that, they'll kind of walk you through this process. So the first thing they'll do is they'll ask you for 2 to 3 years of financial statements. So profit and loss statements, they'll ask you for your tax returns, or at least someone that's good will ask you for your tax returns, because what they're trying to establish is a valuation. And so how we usually come up with that is it's called EBITDA. It's called an EBITDA multiple. So I'm going to spell that out. So it's EBITDA. And so what that stands for is earning before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And so really what we're trying to figure out is, what does this business actually make without all the tax stuff that we do at the end of the year to depreciate the assets, and like what does it actually make, like, cash flow wise, is really what we're trying to figure out. And so we then get a multiple of that. So the multiple that we normally kind of see is between 3 to 5 times, depending on how good the business is, whether it's on a growth trajectory, whether there's some other great factors that go along with it, or less if it's not a very desirable business. So let's just say you make $50,000 in EBITDA, and so that's, again, taking out the depreciation at the end of the year. That's taking out interest. It's basically just like in taking out taxes. So it's basically just your earnings, and you're adding back business expenses. So you would add back things like if you write off a vehicle as part of your business, you'd add that back. If you're expensing travel or whatever personal stuff that you kind of like sneak in there, we would kind of add that back to figure out what does this business actually make, right? And then we would multiply that. So if it made $50,000 in a year, you could multiply that by 3, which would give you $150,000, or you can multiply that by 5, which would give you about $250,000. So somewhere in there will be the valuation of that business. Obviously, if it makes $100,000, then you're talking about 300 to 500 is what you would get from that. So now this is where most people go, well, damn, that's not as much as I thought. I thought I could sell my business for $1 million. And their business, it really isn't making that much money. So to sell it for $1 million, yeah, you'd have to be making $250,000, $300,000 a year in profit to sell it for $1 million, right? It would kind of be in that range is what you'd be looking for. So most people and everyone who has gone and valued their business and tried to sell it, they've all come back to me and said, man, it is not worth nearly as much as I thought. And I was humbled the first time I did this early on because I kind of had the choice of like, man, my business isn't really going that well back when I first started. So I had to figure out, hey, like, what do I do with this? Do I sell it? Do I keep it? Like, do I just shut it down? Like, what are the implications of all those things? And then I realized my business, if I probably couldn't even have given it away at that point in time. So, because I might have had to pay someone to take it at that point. So anyway, I turned around and decided to fix it. But again, that's my story, which you guys are probably all aware of. So let's dive into this a little bit more. So that's how you kind of value a business. Now, another way, if, for example, you're not making money, then you could try and just sell it on assets alone. You could look at the leasehold improvements. You could look at the equipment that you have. But just FYI, those are all depreciating assets, meaning that things need to get repaired. Equipment eventually dies. And so usually, like, let's say you paid $200,000 for equipment. I mean, once it's used, you're lucky if you can get anywhere from like 20, maybe 30 cents on the dollar, typically for used restaurant equipment. And that's even if it's like almost brand new, people are still going to say, well, it's still used. So like, I'll take half of whatever you purchase it for. Like, that's a pretty normal thing. So when you're trying to sell a restaurant, you can look at the assets and try and sell it that way, or you can look at it the other way, which is what it makes, because you have to think of this from a buyer's perspective. A buyer's going to come in and they don't really care about how much the assets are worth or how much you put into it or whatever you did to the business. They want to know how much cash it's going to generate them, right? At least let me paraphrase, like smart buyers would want that. So they want to know, how much money is this business going to generate me? I want to know that, okay, based on the reason why we do 3 to 5 in EBITDA multiples are like, okay, based on what's happening right now, based on what's happening right now, within 3 to 5 years, I can be positive on this thing. I'll be able to pay back what I purchased it for, and then I'll be in the clear within 3 to 5 years. That's kind of what they're looking for. So that's why we value it that way. Now, I will say this. It is possible to sell it to an uneducated or unsophisticated buyer who doesn't know anything and will do things all the wrong ways, and you might be able to get them to purchase it for more than what it's worth. That is possible. The reason I say that is because I was that buyer when I bought my first restaurant, and I paid way more than I should have for it because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I don't advise that because, I mean, people are just going to hate you for the rest of your life, but I don't advise that path. But it is possible, and I will say that. So if you can find an uneducated buyer that doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't ask the right questions, it is possible for you to sell it for more. It just depends on your integrity and ethics. So that's just, I'm going to leave that with you guys because that's a choice that you individually will have to make. But when we're looking at how we can look at our business, we're talking about the valuation. So you can either go assets or you can go in EBITDA multiple. Obviously, in EBITDA multiple is better. But if you're not making any money, then the only thing you really have to do is look at the assets. And it's usually not worth a whole lot. So the next thing we have to figure out is, okay, so even once I establish a valuation of the business, I have to then look at the length of time, right? So how long is it going to take me to sell this thing? If it's a really profitable business, and just talking from experience from myself and those of my clients, usually it can take 3 to 6 months to even find a buyer and have that be good. That's pretty normal. In some cases, it takes years, but 3 to 6 months is fairly normal if it's a sellable asset and stuff like that, or if the price is really, really advantageous. So 3 to 6 months. And then after that, you're probably looking at another 3 to 6 months to actually close the deal and transfer it all over, because there's a lot of other things that come with transferring over a business. So in some cases, it's typically 6 to 12 months. That's a pretty normal, like if everything goes well, 6 to 12 months is a pretty normal scenario for selling a business. So that's one of the things I want everyone to understand, is it often doesn't happen overnight. And there's a significant amount of work. For most of our clients, they're talking about, hey, like this is actually more work than it was to run the business for a short period of time. Say like a couple months, it's way more work. They're putting in 20 hours a week and doing all the things that need to get done to have this thing ready for sale and to sell it. So it's not like you decide to sell it, someone comes in, signs papers, and you're done. There's a lot more to it than that, and that's what most people don't realize. So that's the length of time it'll take. And that alone might have you guys thinking like, well, I could probably just like fix this thing in that amount of time. And that is also true, but we'll get to that in a little bit of a different way in a little bit. So the next thing I want to talk about is, what are the costs associated with selling a business? So let's just say that your business, let's just say it's making $100,000 a year and you're going to try and sell it for $400,000. Okay. So we're doing a EBITDA times 4. So say you're going to say it for $400,000. So typically what happens is, if you use a broker, they're going to want a piece of that, usually 5 to 10% selling commission. It's pretty normal. So you're going to have to lay out a chunk to them. If you can find a buyer yourself, then obviously you can skip out on that. Same thing with real estate commissions and stuff like that. But you're going to have a cost there if you use a business broker or realtor or someone to engage in the selling of the business. So look at it that way. So that's normal. Could be 5 to 10%, somewhere in that neighborhood. Next thing you have to look at is legal costs. So all of a sudden you've got legal costs that come along with it. And that can be anywhere from 5, 10, 15,000 per unit, but I would say usually like 5 to 10,000 is probably pretty normal if they're going through and doing some of the negotiating with the other party's lawyer, and then going through, because there's a lot of things that they have to do. They have to make sure there's what's free and clear of liens. They have to go and make sure all the debts are paid. They have to go and make sure everything's kind of done above board. There's usually a holdback that happens to make sure everything's transferred properly. They have to deal with the landlords in some case if you are renting a premises. So they have to deal with the transfer of leases. If there's a franchise, you have to go through franchise termination or transfer. So there's a lot of those things that they have to deal with. So it's not just as simple as coming up with a buy and sell agreement and you walk in and you take it over. I mean, in the old days, that was a thing, but today it's a little different. There's a lot more factors to go into there. So that's legal costs. Next thing you have to take out is loans. So if you have a loan on your business, that needs to get paid out of proceeds. So again, let's just say that initially you put in $250,000. There's a loan of $250,000 to whether buy it or open it or equipment or whatever, leasehold improvements, whatever the case might be. Maybe you bought it from someone else. So let's just say there's a loan of $250,000 on there. So we've got our purchase price of $400,000, and then we're taking out, let's just say $20,000 in selling commission, and then another $10,000 for legal fees. So now we're down to $370, and then you take out that loan, which is $250, or let's just say it's down to $100,000. So let's take $100,000 off of that, right? So now we're down to whatever, $270 or something like that of what's left. So already there's that. That's happened. So we just have to understand that part of it. And there's usually an interest penalty as well if you pay off a loan early, usually 3 months interest, something like that. So you have to do that as well. So those are a few of the things that happen there. Next, what we have to deal with are things like transfer fees. So if you are in a rented premises, so you have a landlord, I will say that landlords are sometimes the biggest issues in selling a business. They're usually the biggest issue in selling a business, reason-wise, because they then have to approve the new tenant. And then the whole thing there is then there's transfer fees because their lawyers have to go through. In a lot of cases, there's personal guarantees that you might have put in place. So in a lot of leases, your personal guarantee actually stays in effect in the lease. So even though you're subleasing it or transferring it, they sometimes will keep you on there. So later on down the road, you may have to step in and owe money for this business that you've already sold. That can happen if your lawyer is good or the landlord is reasonable. Sometimes you can get out of that. But sometimes there are those things. There are personal guarantees that sometimes will happen. But basically, there's always a transfer fee, which is the legal fees that it takes the landlord to change the lease and blah, 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 blah. So sometimes, that can be $1,000. Sometimes it can be more. There's actually been landlords that even demanded, I think it was like a $20,000 or $30,000 transfer fee just because they saw how much the business was selling for and they tried to get a piece of it. So that's are things that have come up in the past, which I think is crazy, but it's happened. And so I just wanted you guys to be aware of those kind of things that can happen. So you've got those transfer fees. Other things too, if you're part of a franchise, then there's franchise transfer fees. And then there's also, they might force you to do things like upgrades to your business before you transfer it or install new equipment, or there's things like different training fees that the new owner might have to pay. There's things like that the franchises will kind of levy against that. Because obviously for a franchise, it costs more money than to go in and train a brand new person. So usually their transfer fees are relatively high because they then have to train a whole new franchisee and they take on risk when there's a new operator, right? So there are fees that come from that. So those are a bunch of the fees that you can expect, in addition to just like closing all of your regular accounts. Another thing to factor in too is if you run a credit account with, say, your supplier. So say, for example, Cisco, my restaurants always ran on a 2-week credit account. So basically we'd buy something on Thursday, we'd have 2 weeks to pay it, which was great. But eventually, if you have to close your business, you have to pay all of that stuff. You still have to pay payroll. You may have to pay payroll termination fees. The buyer may say that you have to terminate all of your employees and then they have the option to pick them up because they don't want potentially any legal stuff to get carried over. So you may have to pay termination fees or give a certain amount of notice. So there's all that side of it as well. So there's different things that we don't think about because you're still then going to have to pay your payroll. So payroll is not a big deal when you have money coming in, but all of a sudden when the money stops, then you have to, because in essence, we have a 2-week credit with our employees, right? If we have a 2-week payroll, they work and then we pay them after. So we have a 2 weeks that we still will owe, and then 2 weeks, say, of supplies we still have to pay. Usually the buyer will buy the inventory. And so that's something I highly recommend just because otherwise you're sitting on stuff that you can't really use or sell. So usually you do an inventory together and they take on those purchases, but still, you still have to pay the supplier for that, even if you get some of it back. So those are a few fees. Now that we've talked about all the fees and all that shit, you can kind of see that your sale amount of, say, it was 400,000, all of a sudden is starting to dwindle down to about half of that. And we haven't even gotten to taxes yet. So in a lot of cases there, depending on where you are, you'll have to consult your accountant on different ways to structure the sale. And again, there might be different ways, but the buyer might also prefer one way, you might prefer another way. And so in some cases, there's different ways to do it. I'm not going to start going to financial advice because it's going to base on where you are currently and where your business is in. And so I would highly recommend you get tax advice from your accountant, because I don't want to give you the wrong advice here. So, but taxes are going to be a part of it. When you sell an asset, there will be taxes associated with it. So that's another thing. How much those taxes are, that will vary based on the purchase price. That'll vary based on the tax laws and stuff like that. But the only things that are consistent are death and taxes, right? So you're going to pay taxes of some kind when you do this thing. So that's also going to take away from your sale price, right? Because you got to pay taxes. All right. Now that we know what we could reasonably get from the sale of the business after we factor all of these things out. And yes, I've seen many businesses go into the negative by this point. I've seen them say like, well, I'm actually going to lose money on this deal. Or I'm just going to break even. I've had some people talk to me and they're like, yeah, I sold it and I broke even after 10 years of work. And I was like, well, that's a shitty deal. So anyway, that happens. That's a thing that happens and it sucks. But the next thing we have to figure out, now that we have a reasonable idea of what we can sell it for, the next thing we have to figure out is how likely is it that we will be able to sell it? And so what is a buyer going to need when they buy your business? They're going to probably need a loan unless they have tons of money and they can buy it for cash. And there are some good deals that can be had by by paying in cash, but usually those are the deals of very distressed assets. Because sometimes you can walk in and buy a restaurant for 25 grand or 50 grand. It's possible, depending on how, again, from a selling perspective, this is a really motivated seller. The business is probably already closed, and they're just trying to get someone to take over the lease. Because here's the deal: if you close down, you still have to pay the landlord unless you declare bankruptcy, and then that's a whole other host of issues that come with that. In some cases, the landlords might have personal guarantees and still go after you personally and blah, 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 blah. So there's a whole lot of things that can happen in that realm. But hey, real quick, if you're a multi-unit restaurant owner or you're looking to become one, I've identified the 3 deadliest mistakes that are killing most restaurants right now. And more importantly, I'll show you how to avoid these exact mistakes. Just grab my free copy of the Multi-Unit Restaurant Playbook by going and clicking on the link in the description below. Inside, you'll discover my proven system for building a restaurant empire that runs on autopilot and the mistakes you must avoid if you want to stay profitable and scalable. So get the free playbook and transform your business today. If you have cash, it's great because you can walk in and buy most businesses. But if you're trying to get a high enough selling price, most people that are buying restaurants do not have $400,000 in cash that are just sitting there waiting to deploy that. And even if they did, it wouldn't be smart to put all of their cash into that because, again, one of the key things when you're looking at buying businesses, you want to try and use other people's money as much as possible because the interest is tax deductible. And anyway, so let's dive into this a little bit more. So in order to get approved, you're going to have to get approved whether it's an SBA loan or just a regular bank loan, or maybe you take out a loan against your house, or like there's different things that you can try and do. Most people try and go for a small business loan. So in that case, what is the small business like? What do they want? What do they want to see? If you're going to approve a loan and you're going to buy a business, what's the first thing they ask for? Tax returns of the business that they're financing. And here's where a lot of deals fall apart, is that the business isn't making money. So the bank goes, why would I finance you to take over a losing business? Because then I'm going to be out this money because you're probably going to do the same thing that they're doing, right? Because we know that restaurants are one of the areas that most banks and the small business folks, they don't like restaurants because restaurants are volatile. They can fail a lot. And if you're listening to this, that could be the case for you. So like obvious, right? So they don't want to finance a whole lot of restaurants. It is very, very difficult. I was lucky when I bought some of my first restaurants is because there was a government program that backed the bank so that if they lost money, the government actually paid them back. It was like zero risk for the bank and all profit. But it allowed me to get into the game. So that was a great thing for me, even better thing for the bank because they made a hell of a lot of money off me. Anyway, so the thing is, most banks aren't going to approve loans for restaurants, or they're going to want to see much more collateral from you or like you as a buyer. And so that's where a lot of deals fall apart because the question they ask is like, why would I finance a losing business? Like why am I going to give a loan of $400,000 for a business that doesn't make money? You know what I mean? So however, if your business does make money, then it might be okay. But again, it's up to the approval. There's interest rate things that are happening, whether they're going up or down. It depends on the economy because they do adjust their risk levels depending on what's going on in the economy, what they see and how many of each type of business they have loans out for. They'll readjust their risk, right? I remember when I got to the point where I had enough locations, they looked at me and they said I was too high of a risk. They had to kick me up to another department, which had much more stringent requirements because I wasn't a small business anymore when I had 4 locations because the loans were over $1 million and stuff like that. So there was whole different parameters around that because the bank said, hey, even though you've been with us and you've never missed a loan payment and your business are doing well, we still can't finance you because it's above our risk tolerance for your type of business. So I had to go to another bank and get financing there. So anyway, so those types of things happen. So that's where the deal might fall apart if you get things. Now, another option is you could do seller financing, in which case what you'd end up doing is basically saying, hey, you just come over here, you take this thing, and then you pay me this $400,000 over time. And then you're trusting that that person's actually going to pay you, number one. And you're going to trust that they're going to do a better job of running it than maybe you did. And so they're going to continue, or at least as good of a job as you did. And they're going to continue on doing it, and they're going to pay you over the long term, over, say, 10 years. That is a hell of a risk to take. And I just want everyone to make sure we understand that. That's a very big risk for you to take because you don't know if you're going to get paid. And you're leaving it up to a lot of external factors. So as a as a seller, you want the money. So you want, when this deal closes, you want to have your cash, right? You want to have it in the bank account. Otherwise, there's just a lot of risk and you may not get paid. And that's not a good scenario to be in. And again, the whole thing that we look at is, what is the general economy doing at this time? So when we look at supply and demand, right? Are there a lot of restaurants for sale at the moment, right? And if there is, what's the demand on restaurants, for example, that are not making that much money, or people, the owners are working 80 plus hours a week just to make it go? Like what is sellable about that asset, right? So if there's a lot of restaurants, like right now as I'm filming this, there's no shortage of restaurants for sale, right? There's zero shortage. So I, as a buyer, could come in and I'd be like, well, I'm either going to go for the ones that are going to be the cheapest because then I know I can turn it around because I'm a better operator, or I'm going to find the ones that are already making cash, and I will pay more for that because it's going to be less work and a higher guaranteed return, basically, right? Or risk-adjusted return, I should say. So those are kind of the things that we need to think about. And so in our experience working with clients, and again, the personal experience of myself and our coaching team, what we've seen time and time again is that people, when they go to sell their business, typically sell it for the wrong reasons. They sell it because they don't know how to fix it. And so that's number one. They're not selling it because it's making money. They're selling it because it isn't. And it costs them too much, which means that puts you in a distressed position when selling, which means you will typically get far less for it than what you could otherwise, which means it's not going to put you in a great place. So in a lot of cases, we've seen people spend 6 to 12 months trying to sell this thing, put in that much work, and they end up taking a loss on it, or maybe breaking even, or maybe ending up with a little bit of money, and they go back and they're like, well, I haven't paid myself in 3 years. This in no way is worth what I thought it would be at the end, because everybody thinks their asset is sellable. Everyone says, oh, I've got a restaurant, I can just sell it. I'll be able to get back all the money I put in, and I'll get paid for all the time I put in. That's almost never true, okay? Your business will never be worth to someone else what it is worth for you, right? If I was going to sell my business today, no one would pay what I think it's worth because I have an emotional investment and tie to it. But the numbers are what leads those types of decisions, and the buyer always wants a deal because the less they can pay, the more money they can make, right? And so that runs completely counter to your goals of making as much money as possible. So people put a lot of time and a lot of effort into selling their business only to come out with what they feel is probably the short stick. And those who have come on board with us as clients, because we've helped a bunch of them come on board and they said, hey, I want to be able to exit at a higher multiple, because ironically enough, the path to selling your business for more money or fixing it is the same path. You still need to show more profit. You still need to have better operations, have a proven system. You need to have the business work without you as like a founder or owner-led business, because otherwise a buyer's just buying a job, which is not usually what sophisticated buyers are looking for. So the thing is, the path is actually the same. You have to do the same things, right? You have to make more money, and you have to make the business run without you. You have to just do better at a lot of stuff. The path's actually the same. And ironically enough, the time to fix your business is actually usually less than trying to sell it. But most people don't understand that. And so that's why I'm kind of making this podcast, because if you think, okay, I could be 6 to 12 months down the road and I probably won't be getting nearly what I thought I could get from it, in that 6 to 12 months, I could have probably just fixed this thing. And here's what we found. Is that restaurant owners that come in and they say, Andrew, I want to sell my business. Like they come in and they just want us to help them make it better for a sale. Usually what happens is by the time that we're done, 3 or 4 months later, they're like, well, shit, I'm just going to keep it because it's making money and requires less of me in my business. I'm just going to keep this thing because all of the reasons I wanted to sell are gone. So why would I sell it? Right? I've created this amazing business. Like, why would I want to sell it? So that's the kind of conversation we often have. And people that have already started selling the businesses, we have some people that come in with 3, 4 locations, and maybe they're already selling one underperforming location, or they're closing it down, or whatever the case is, while we work on the other ones to make them better. What's so funny is that they come in and then they tell us after a few months, they're like, man, had I known that, I wouldn't have sold this other one because it was so much work and I got like nothing out of it when I could have just fixed it instead and I would still have the asset. Because one of the biggest things that you will notice once you sell a business, and this is an interesting phenomenon that happens because you think, and the first time I heard this, I thought they were full of shit when someone told me this. But what ends up happening is once you sell a business, and you have an amount of cash in your account, you immediately enter a scarcity mindset. You think, hey, I've got money in the bank. Let's go spend it all on stuff like that. Let's do things. But for businesses that actually make money, you end up in a place where you realize that, hey, that's the max amount I'm ever going to get from that asset. So any expense that comes out, like, I'll give you an example, say if you have the same corporation bank account and you're banking, there's like a $5 fee per month. I mean, say you've got 100 grand sitting in that account and the $5 fee keeps coming out. Eventually that just starts draining your money. $5 fees every month, just keep it there. Right. So like that $5 hits harder than when you were in operation and maybe you're paying $100 for banking or $50 for banking a month or whatever, depending on your account structure. Maybe you're paying more, but you didn't feel it because you were bringing in money. There's always new cash coming in. Wasn't a big deal, but now there's no more cash coming in. So you actually feel poorer when you sell your business than richer, which is weird because you feel richer when you have consistent cash coming in, and it's continuing. So it's a different thing when you do sell your business. So just FYI, make sure you have something that you're going to do with that money. If you do sell it and you do have a bunch of cash after, figure out something you're going to do with it, because otherwise that money drains really, really quickly. So I just want everyone to understand that even if you do sell, the money doesn't go very far and it goes very quickly. So the whole point of this podcast is for me just to educate everybody on what's going to happen when you do go to sell your business, the steps you have to go through. And what most people find is that the reason that they're selling their businesses, honestly, for the same amount of time, effort, and return, you might as well just fix your business. The problem is that most people don't know how to fix their business, or they don't think it's possible to fix their business. But the truth is you just don't know how to fix it yet, right? Most people think there's no way to increase my sales. There's no way I can get my labor lower than what it is. You've probably said this. There's no way I can get my food costs down from what it is. I have so many people that will comment on some of our advertising and stuff like that because we talk about having a 55 to 60% prime cost. And so someone said, you can't even get a 60% prime cost. Like it's crazy. There's no way you could even get 60%, even though 60% is kind of that industry standard that you should be shooting for, right? 60% food and labor. And everyone's like, that's not even possible. And I'm like, well, clearly it's possible. Otherwise it wouldn't be the industry standard. You just don't know how to do it yet. And that's okay. Like what the problem is now. So now you get to fix it. Like that's the thing, right? You want to know what the problem is so you can fix it. But there's this weird thing with restaurant owners. And again, I say this because I've been a restaurant owner for the majority of my life. I started when I was 20 years old, and I'm almost 40 now. So it's like, I've been there and I've said all of these things and I joke about it and I laugh about it because I realize my mental state and my mental frame at that time was not as educated as it is now, having gone through it and having seen a different perspective. That's what I believed then, but it's not what I believe now because I've been presented with new information and I found out new things that are different. And so therefore my worldview has changed on what's possible, right? But people often say, no, there's no way you can do that. But the fact is you just don't know how to do it yet. And the whole point is you want to figure out what the problem is so you can then find out how to solve it, right? Because the whole thing in business is we are trying to figure out how to solve problems in our business. If you don't know how to grow your sales, like I think if you changed in your verbiage, if you changed I can't with I don't know how to, it would change everything in your business, right? Think of all those things. Oh, I can't work less than 80 hours a week in my business. I can't grow sales higher than, let's say you're doing $10,000 a week right now. There's no way. It's impossible to get to $20,000 a week. Change that with, I don't know how to get to $20,000 a week. And then you have a problem to solve, right? And so then your brain can go, okay, well, let's find out how can I get to $20,000 a week? Because I will tell you, there's a saying that whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, either way, you're right. Because if you do not believe something is possible, then you will not try and do that thing. If you don't think it's possible to get your sales up to a certain level or get your food costs down to a certain level, you're just not going to do it. And I will tell you that I said the same things in my business. I said exactly, like, I am you. If you're saying these things, I was you. And what's so funny is I had this one manager one time because I thought I could never get my food costs below, I think it was like 37%. It was like 37, 38% or something like that was my food costs. And I'm like, man, it's impossible to get my food costs below 37, 38%. And then I had this one manager that came in and the way she made the products, she portioned a little bit less, but did it in a way so that everything was actually better, more presentable. Customers really liked it. And all of a sudden our food costs dropped to like 32%. So we cut 5 percentage points of our sales, right? So that's 5% straight to the bottom line, by the way. We dropped that 5%. And I was like, oh shit, like this is possible, right? And I never thought that we could ever get our labor below, in a quick service model, labor is a little bit lower anyway, just FYI. But we couldn't get it below like 25 or 26%. And we ended up getting it below 20 as non-management, by the way, but just our hourly in a quick service model. Because some people listening to this are probably like, well, that's impossible. Well, it depends on the model, depends on the concept. But anyway, the point is, I couldn't get it below a certain point, and then I had one manager who was really good at scheduling, who was really good at training, and really good, and they came in and they're like, yeah, we can like staff a person less because these people are better at doing their jobs because I train them better. And all of a sudden, we dropped 5 points from our labor. And all of a sudden, I went from having a food and labor cost of like 70, 75% down to a place where it was like 60%. And I had tried this for years myself because I thought if I can't do it, nobody can do it, right? Because I like to think I'm a smart person. If I can't do it, nobody can do it, right? So that was my worldview. And then they did it. And it took them doing that for me to go, well, shit, maybe I don't know everything that there is to know. That makes sense? So I just want to make sure that we're understanding all of those things. So when it comes to the business, we just have this thing where, well, because I don't know how to do it, it can't be done. And if anyone else out there is doing it or tells me different, they're full of crap or they're fake or they must be selling drugs out of there. It must be money laundering, or maybe they're a franchise. I have so many people come to me and say, Andrew, like this other place over there is like really, really busy, but they have worse food than we do, right? And they're charging more for it and people are there and they're busy. And so I'm like, and then I'm like, okay, so like, shouldn't we probably change a few things about your business so you can do that? And they're like, oh, well, that's a block down the road. And I'm like, dude, it's only a block down the road. Like, there's no reason why you cannot be doing what they are doing. They are just doing something different than you are. And we need to go in and do the things differently to make your business like that one. And even then they're like, no, we can never do that. I'm like, dude, the only reason you can't do that is because you don't think you can, right? If we go in and we do the same things they are, you'll be able to have reasonably the same results as they do. Like, there's no reason why not. You know what I mean? So we just have to go and do those things. It is possible. It is just our business will only grow up to the beliefs that we have or the skills that we have. There's two things outside the business, right? So either you'll get to a place where you don't know what to do to grow it any further, in which case you need to upskill or learn new things, or the beliefs, because if you don't believe that it can grow any further, well, you're not going to try, and so therefore it'll stay where it is. So that's where your business is going to get stuck. Right? And so you have to be open to the idea of actually changing it. Now, I know I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but I think it's important simply because most people go and sell their businesses because they think either it's impossible or they get up to the skill level and they're like, well, I guess that's it. I just can't fix it. And that's why they decide to sell. When the reality is, like, if there's restaurants out there that can have thousands of locations nationwide, like, there's no reason why your restaurant can't, right? It is simply that either the product might not be good enough, maybe you might not be good enough at what you're doing yet, maybe, let's say maybe your staff aren't good enough. Like, there's so many other things that can be there. Maybe your financial model isn't where it needs to be, maybe your pricing's wrong, maybe your costing's wrong, but like, there's so many things that can be there. But there's no reason, because there are businesses that are out there that are doing it and that are really successful. And there's probably restaurant owners that are successful. In your town, there's probably somebody that owns like 3 or 4 restaurants and they're barely ever there, but they're busier than your restaurant. It's because they do things differently than you do. It's not that they have different problems. They just have different ways to solve them, right? And so that's the thing we have to understand. And so my point is, if you think that selling is the only way, I would just encourage you to understand that it is possible to fix your business, and it will not take as long as you think it will if you have the right help. The reason I say that is because you're going to pay in either way. Here's the thing that most people don't understand. You will pay either by basically calling what's called the ignorance tax. You can pay that. So, and this is what I did for my first like 6 years of business, by the way, is I paid the ignorance tax, and I basically just learned things myself. I'm like, well, I'll try this, and then that didn't work. I'll try this. That didn't work. I spent time, effort, money. I lost it on the opportunity. Like, for example, instead of my business making $100,000 a year, it made negative 20, 30,000 when I first started. So literally my opportunity cost then was like $130,000 because it should have been making $100,000 a year. So that was my opportunity cost. And so every year I delayed that. That's the ignorance tax that I paid. So the ignorance tax is that I should have been making 100,000, didn't know how to do that, so I ended up losing money. So that's what it cost me every year until I learned how to have a business that makes $100,000 a year or more, right? So at that point, I was figuring it out on my own. I was making mistakes, and my time and effort and the time I spent not getting results, all of that added up to way more than it would have taken had I just been like, hey man, does somebody know how to do this? Can I find a mentor to help me who's like already done this stuff? Because guess what? Most problems we're not solving rocket science. It's all been done before. Someone else has already done this. Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? Like, how stupid is that, right? Because we start making wheels that are squares and it doesn't work very well. Someone's already invented the wheel. Let's just go and like copy what they're doing. Let's go talk to them. So that's the thing that we have to do, is because most of the time we're trying to figure it out ourselves because we're prideful, because there's ego, because whatever. And I was all those things. And so it took me so much longer to fix my business, right? And so that's the ignorance tax that I paid, because you're going to pay either way. Either you can pay for help, for someone to help you with it, right? Or you can do it yourself and spend your time and effort, and you're going to pay with the time that you don't get those results. You're going to pay either way, right? So the question is, as a prudent business owner, which one do you want to pay with, right? I would rather pay money to save time, because then with that time I've gained, I can make more and have more of the results faster. So that will compound and actually get me more in the long run than doing it myself and doing it the bootstrapping or the cheap way, because that just takes way longer and still costs me a lot of money. And then the other way that you can pay is by selling your business and not selling it for nearly what it's worth or taking a loss on it. You can pay that way too, right? And so that's the ultimate tax, because then there's nothing more you can gain from that business. So you're going to pay either way. So which way do you want to pay? Is really the question. And that's what most people don't understand. And that's why there's so many restaurant owners that are penny wise and pound foolish sometimes, right? Because they're like, man, if I can save a few cents. So I hear this all the time. They go and shop around to different places to try and find lower food costs. That's cool. But like, say it takes them 3 hours to do that per week, to go and do different shopping. Now, if you delegated that to someone else whose like hourly rate was a little bit less, maybe that makes sense. But just an example of that, as we used to have people that say, well, I don't order from Cisco and get it delivered. I just go and pick it all up myself, and I do all the grocery shop myself, because it saves me like a couple $100s. And so I asked them, okay, in that like 3 hours that you spend doing that, do you think you could have like gained more than like $100 by bringing in more catering business, by like marketing your business more? And if that's true, then you should go and do that instead. You know what I mean? So it's just the way we think about it. But we always think like, oh, if I can save like a few dollars here, that's great. But we don't factor in the time and the opportunity cost of what we're doing, because we could actually be growing our business in that time, which will then compound for the long term. But instead we try and focus on saving $1 here, but then losing $100 in revenue because of it, right? So it's just, sometimes we think about it the wrong way. So anyway, I know I've been getting off on a little bit of a little rabbit hole here, but I think it's important to understand how we evaluate our business decisions, because our business decisions are just a reflection of our mental state and how we perceive things. So whether you're thinking about keeping your business or selling it or buying a new one or whatever, we just have to keep all of these things in mind. And we have to make sure that we let our logic and data make the decisions. I just filmed a podcast yesterday with Russ Hawkins talking about data, and I can almost guarantee that most people, when they're selling their business, they're selling it from an emotional place, because they are frustrated and they're tired and they're angry and they are just in a place of maybe despair. So I'm just going to sell it. I'm going to throw in the towel. But they don't realize how much work that actually is, how long it's going to take. And they just make this emotional decision. But what I want you guys to do, as sophisticated and smart business owners that you are, because you're listening to this podcast, I want you to make sure you actually look at the real scenario. And if the choice of selling your business is the right one, because you're going to make a killing off of it, that's great. Or maybe you have another bigger opportunity. Maybe you want to switch into a different concept. Or maybe if you're in a franchise, you want to start your own and you want to just get some seed capital to be able to do that. All those things could be cool. But I want to make sure you're making it from a place that's data-driven and based on the numbers instead of emotions, because Logic drives good business decisions. Emotion kills good business decisions. Okay? So that's what we have to understand. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was valuable, and you've learned some things about selling businesses today. Whether you should sell it, whether you should keep it, that decision is ultimately up to you. I just want to make sure you have the right facts before you do it, and you can understand that for a lot of you guys who are thinking about selling, there is a potential other side to this thing, and it is possible to fix it. And it's just up to us and the way that we view the world. And if we change our worldview, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of opportunities that open up, and we can drastically change the course of our life and our business. All right, guys, thank you for listening. We'll see you soon.